Hello and welcome to the last episode of Learn to Crochet, a Felicity Crafts Special. So now you have created your square. Whatever size your square is, you now need to practice it over and over again. To make a single bed-sized blanket, you need to make 100 squares, 10 by 10. And you need to join those squares together. Now you might think this is a slightly different style for her. This blanket on here was the one that my auntie made for my wedding nearly 25 years ago, and it's just one giant square. So she started with that in the middle and carried around, and lots of people say that that is all they can ever do. And you are crocheting, and that's fine. But if you can learn to read a pattern, the world of crochet is then open to you. Now it's difficult to read patterns and it will take practice, and I know you don't want to hear this, but by far the best way of doing it is to learn a granny square, make hundreds of them so that you're really familiar with that particular pattern, the one that I've given you, then read the pattern and that will show you what happens. So in a minute we're going to flip onto the other camera and I'm going to really explain how it would be written in notation. If you want to see a written pattern, you need to go over to the Felicity Crafts Facebook page, and that's where I will have it written down. If you're not on Facebook, you can message me and I will make sure you have the written pattern of this one, and then you just need to look at that and that will unlock the mysteries of reading a pattern. We will also come back to that later again. I will talk to you about that in a minute. But before we do that, we have to join our squares together, and there's two ways of doing it. So you can either, well actually there isn't two ways of doing it, there are hundreds of ways of doing it. I'm just going to show you two ways of doing it. There is a right and a wrong side in crochet. It's not enormously different because blankets are intended to be used from both sides, so they look quite similar. But if you look closely, one side looks a little bit flatter than the other. So if you put the two together, right sides together, and don't worry too much about that, cut yourself off a piece of wool and then just sew them together with the simplest of stitch. Stitchers often call this a whip stitch, and you are just going to go over, and the point is, if you are using the same coloured wool like I'm doing, when you have done this and you flip it out in a second, you can't see the join because you're using the same colour, and that's all about making it just join together like that. You can crochet the last two together on the last round, and that creates a much stronger join, but is a little bit more advanced, and we're not going to worry about that in this very beginner's one. That's the easiest way to join them together. If you want to see the join, so you're making a feature of the join by using a contrasting colour, you can crochet those together as well. But again, that's really something for later. So the beginner one is to just whip stitch it together with the same coloured wool. You often add a border around the edge as well, one extra row of trebles all the way around the edge for strength as well, so that instead of having lots of breaks all the way around, you have just one. They're all finishing off things. Once you've made that kind of granny square, there are hundreds and hundreds of alternative granny squares that you can make. And there are pictures all over my Instagram of lots of different versions for you to do. You need to be able to read the pattern to do that. So we'll just go back onto the other camera so we can see the square that we have made and just make sure we know what we've done in proper crochet notation. So this is what it will sound like written down in proper notation. This is what we've made. Chain 4 and join into a circle. Chain 3, which counts as the first treble. Treble 2 into the loop, chain 2. Treble 3 into the loop, chain 2. Treble 3 into the loop, chain 2. Treble 3 into the loop, chain 2. Join to the top of the first chain 3. Round 2. Chain 3, which counts as the first treble, chain 1. Treble 3 into the first corner, chain 2. Treble 3 into the same corner, chain 1. Treble 3 into the next corner, chain 2. Treble 3 into the same corner, chain 1. Treble 3 into the next corner, chain 2, treble 3 into the same corner, chain 1, treble 3 into the last corner, chain 2, treble 2 and join to the top of the first chain 3. Fasten off. Now you join a new colour wherever you like. It doesn't have to be here. You could join it wherever you like, and you carry on in the same pattern. So we've got constant groups of trebles, 3 trebles, 2 chains for a corner and 1 chain in between, and just carry on that pattern. So that's how it would look written down. And if you go over onto the Felicity Crafts Facebook page now, that I will write that pattern out as it would look. So you need to then look at how that written pattern is and think about it as you're doing it. Make another granny square following those written instructions, and that will make you think, oh, I understand what it means when it says this. It's unusual because when I learnt to knit from a written pattern first, and then I started to knit. But in crochet, it's a lot easier to get this into what we call at school your muscle memory by constantly doing it first and get it so you know what you're doing and then look at the words. I know that sounds an odd way around of doing it. The other thing is, I gave you a beginner square at the beginning with a chain 6 in the middle. Once you're really confident with that, it's better to change that down to chain 4 at the beginning, because I said 6 because you need to be able to get that first one like that, but chain 4 is more normal at the beginning, so you could make a slightly smaller hole and make it less gappy. It's the only thing that you change from being a beginner, just moving it on. So once you can do a traditional granny square, you can make it into one giant blanket by going round and round and round forever. You can do it that way. But there are all different corruptions of a granny square which use the same stitches in different patterns, and you will end up even something as complicated as this one, as beautiful as this one. This is my favourite blanket that lives on my rocking chair. It's still only using trebles, it's just changing them into a slightly different pattern, but it's still a treble and a chain. And you can do all of that. You now have the skills, you just need to get that reading the pattern thing. The other thing it's possible to do in crochet is not to bother reading a pattern at all, but look at something and think, oh, I can see that's a treble, right? It takes practice. It really does just take practice. And the best thing you can do now is make 100 of these, and that will give you a blanket, or one giant one, and that will give you a blanket, and that will have given you such practice that you know what you're doing. If you think you're going to get bored of doing that, snazz up the colours. That's a really good way of doing it. Make it so that you're doing lots of interesting ones. I like to do 10 squares and then join them, and then 10 squares and then join them, so that it feels as if you're getting somewhere with it. If you can achieve 10 squares in a night, and definitely, you know, a few squares, so you can get to that kind of stage. There are lots of other types of crochet as well. There's this kind of crochet when we're making little toys. This is a different stitch, but if you've got, this is a double crochet that creates this, which is a smaller, tighter one that looks more like traditional knitting, but you have already got the skills to do that. This is a different, I'm going to do a video on this for a different type of crochet later on, but you need to get more confident with this one first. You don't want to find out too much to do. So tomorrow, and you could be watching this any time, of course, so this is going to be Saturday the 30th of January 2021 at 2 o'clock. I am going to be live, and you can come, you can show me what you've achieved this week, and I will be really proud of you, or you can discuss any of your problems and I can help you to sort those ones out. And we can talk about next steps. What are we going to do next? Where would you be best to, after you've done your practicing, what would you be best to do? The details for that event are on Felicity Crafts. It's just £3 and I'll be able to tell you. It'll be a small group, I'll limit the numbers, so you can come and chat to me and ask any questions. You can always find me through the Felicity Crafts Facebook site. So I look forward to meeting some of you and seeing all that you've achieved. You've gone from beginner to being crochet queen, and I'm proud of you. Goodbye.